Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Kindred Skulls. My name is Gregg Blake. I'm here. We're here. We're sad. We're all feeling it. Tough loss this week. I'm here to talk about that tough loss with my friend and co-host Matt Freese. How you doing, Matt? We have to stop meeting like this.
Yeah,
These
I mean,
post-loss.
you changed the cadence up on me in the intro, but it's kind of fitting, right? Like it's not the up-tempo, exciting Josh Dobbs Vikings anymore.
It's a little tough to amp up a 2 point loss to the Bears. It's not a great feeling. Not a great game either. I feel like everyone in my life that I've talked to about it was like, this was not really fun to watch. And I was kind of like, yeah, I agree. It was a tough one all
Oh my
around.
goodness.
How did you
So
feel about it?
so yeah,
Yeah.
we're recording this on Friday afternoon, right? And did you watch the game last night, the Seahawks Cowboys game at all?
Oh yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. So like look at the juxtaposition between the game we got on Monday night, which was like complete garbage, and the game we got yesterday, which I think the refs calls were mostly good, but like was like the worst TV product in terms of ref involvement, right? There was like a flag on like every other play, it felt like, but was
Yeah.
just way more amazing than the game because the offenses actually looked competent.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not as though those are bad defenses that played badly either. It was just like a really good football teams
Well, they
beating
they
each other,
played bad. The defenses played badly for
Well,
sure,
yeah,
but that's because the offenses were good more so than the defenses were bad, I would think.
that
So,
that's what I'm
yeah.
saying, trying to say. Yeah. But yeah, definitely a more entertaining game. You want to just talk about that one? Talk
Yeah, I
about
mean
the
kind of a
nightcap?
little bit.
Yeah.
No.
No, we have a product to deliver and we shall deliver. Do you want to just dive in here, Matt? You want to talk about the Bears game a little bit? Let's talk about, what went wrong, what went right. In particular, one of the biggest topics of conversation post game, online at least, seems to be about end of game play calling. Is Coach O'Connell soft? Is he, was he afraid to trust Josh Dobbs after throwing four picks? What exactly was happening there at the end of the game? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I guess first I'm kind of interested. What is your take on that end of game play calling? Like, where do you fall on the, we were too conservative, our defense played too conservative, maybe, on that final drive. What Kevin O'Connell is conservative in general. Like, where do you fall on that spectrum?
I'm carving the defense out of the conversation entirely
Hmm.
because the only reason that was a ball game was because of them.
Fair
In
enough.
many ways. Yeah, so I not even part of my consideration. I think what happened was like to on a broader view, I think Josh Dobbs came in, gave us a new wrinkle on offense, and teams had a tough time adjusting to that, especially in game one when he comes off the bench. Because we were doing stuff we don't usually do, but I think it was probably a very simple offense. I haven't watched the tape the way that you have, but I think things were probably simplified for obvious reasons.
Hmm.
Not that Josh Dobbs can't handle it, of course. He's a literal rocket scientist. But just for obvious reasons, not enough time with the team, etc. And I think the Bears looked to me like a team that figured out what we were doing, and came out with a really good game plan. And we had a tough time adjusting. And then the turnovers start snowballing. And I think by the end of the game, Coach O'Connell was coaching scared, but I don't mean like he's a coward or something. I think he just didn't trust anyone on offense to deliver and was just trying to keep the game close so that something could bounce our way, and we walk away with an ugly win. I think that's what it looked like
Yeah.
to me. Just my general sense of it. How do you feel
Okay, yeah,
having
no,
watched?
I was definitely interested to get your perspective on what it is because I've gone through a couple things. I did end up writing an article on Kevin O'Connell's end of game decision making, kind of his fourth down decision making, all that sort of stuff. For zone coverage, I write over there at zonecoverage.com, so go check that out. That came out a little bit earlier this week. Um, but at the end of the day, the conclusion I came to is I think Kevin O'Connell is a little bit too conservative with the way he calls end of games, because it's not just a Josh Dobbs phenomenon. We have kind of seen it in each of the last 3 weeks, right? People were really upset after the Saints game of how we kind of didn't score any points and quote unquote turtled in the second half. I don't think that that's exactly the truth, but on the last couple drives in that game, we did very much, run the. I think it was run on both of those drives. And
Right.
maybe there was a run pass in there, and it was like the last 3 drives we ran 8 total plays, we ran 9 total plays, and 8 of them were runs, right? And the one pass was on third down. So like it was just like a crazy conservative game plan for the fourth quarter in that game. In the Broncos game on the final drive, the Vikings were up. They had a series where they went run. They might have passed on the last play, I don't remember, and then kicked a field goal rather than going for more of a touchdown. Now, I don't know. That one's kind of hard. I think the Vikings offense ultimately was trying to score a touchdown in the red zone, right? I think they were trying to not turn the ball over, but I think they were trying to score a touchdown, and it just didn't end up working out with the run plays that they called, right? And you're at the 12. It's kind of hard to get a first down in that situation, right? You got to get down to the 2, where it's definitely doable, but it's just kind of hard. So like getting another set of downs, I think in that scenario isn't all that achievable. And you've already turned the ball over 3 times, so I get kind of wanting to play it safe a little bit. They might have gone run in that scenario. And then obviously they go run short screen pass that goes nowhere in this game.
Hmm.
And I think this game was the most frustrating for me because they were on the fringe of field goal range, right? Like you can make this game a lot more difficult for the Bears if you get into field goal range and you kick it and they need to go down and score a touchdown, something they haven't done all game, right?
Hmm.
You just need like 5 yards to be able to get in the field goal range, and the offense wasn't even able to accomplish that. But if you go back and look at last year, actually the Vikings were also conservative in very similar situations. So the games that showed up where the Vikings were like up by 1 score, right, with the ball in a 4-minute situation, despite all of the 1 score games the Vikings played in last year and won, they only had that type of situation, which we've now kind of had 3 weeks in a row, 3 times all of last year as well. And it was the Cardinals game, the Jets game, and then the Patriots game. Like all the other situations, the Vikings were on offense at the end of the game trying to come back, or it was a tie game and they were trying to score to win the football game, right? So it wasn't really a situation where they can, it's a 4-minute drill where they're trying to run out the clock, right? They're always trying to score in those scenarios, in most of those scenarios. But they went like run, I think, in the Jets game, and run pass in the other 2 games, right? And didn't convert a first down on any of those series, right? And they ended up punting, and they just didn't get punished for it because their defense came up with a ton of timely turnovers or fourth down stops or whatever all of last year to help them win all those close 1-score games, right?
Right.
So it does seem to me to be an overall philosophy for Kevin O'Connell, right? That he's going to try to play ultra conservative even when he has Kirk Cousins and when it's not a Josh Dobbs thing.
Hmm.
And honestly,
I would not have guessed that.
yeah, going back and looking that up, I was like, we had to have been aggressive to close out a game last year, right? Like it just kind of felt like that's the way the season went, but it really, we weren't aggressive. When we were in similar situations, we were very conservative on offense. So that's kind of a question. I'd like to be more aggressive.
That, folks, is the kind of analysis that you get on Kindred Skulls, all right? Nobody's
Yes.
talking about that. So go ahead.
I
Sorry.
I'd like to be more aggressive in those situations. I get it from a coach's perspective, right? Your defense has been playing great all day. I mean, we can talk about how the punter has not been good this year either. Like Ryan Wright, for as much praise as we gave him last year, had 2 really bad touchbacks in the Broncos game that bounced at the 1 yard line and rolled into the end zone. Like, yeah, maybe the Gunners should have gotten down there and down it at the 1 yard line, but like the punter's job is to make the ball stop at the 1 yard line, right? Like that's ultimately the goal for every punter there. So like bouncing into the end zone, like punting's a hard job. Like I don't understand how kicking works, and how you're able to be that consistent time after time after time. But the guys
Yeah.
haven't been this year, right? And in this game against the Bears, it was literally worse than a touchback. He kicked it out of bounds at like the 22 yard line or something like that, right? So that's kind of a struggle there. But at the end of the day, the Bears only needed a field goal to go down and win the football game, right? So you can't really play conservative in that scenario. You want to score more points to go up more. I think when you're giving them, they need to get to what the 40 to have a legit shot at kicking a field goal. Um,
Right.
And I would have really liked to see more QB run game in that scenario, right? Just run his own read play. It gives you a pure numbers advantage in a situation where the defense is trying to load the box to try to take away the run game, right? Like you are putting yourself down a man blocking by running under center run plays in that scenario to me. Now the second run play should have worked. They had it blocked up with the exception of Risner and Darisaw had a miscommunication over who was supposed to take the 2-eye, and they let that guy free. And they had it blocked up if that guy gets blocked, but he didn't get blocked, right? So, and that's a scenario where quarterback run game helps. Like you can read that and eliminate a guy from the blocking scheme, even if it's hard to block him, right? So to me, that's kind of an issue. Fourth down decision making has also been a question with O'Connell to me over his time here. So, like, for example, recently, particularly in the Broncos game, we had those 2 fourth down decisions to punt. In this Bears game, we actually went for it on 4th and 7 and 4th and 3. I heard somebody say that the calculator said you don't go for it on 4th and 7. That's not true. The calculator in the game situation, I did it out, says the Vikings get a +1% win probability for going for it on that. But the thing with Kevin O'Connell is he's been very consistent. He goes for it when he should, quote unquote. And this is RBSDM. Ben Baldwin runs a website that kind of has some analytic stuff. It has EPA. I use it for EPA per play and also for the kind of fourth down calculator stuff, right? Like the fourth down calculator stuff is always going to be way more aggressive than most coaches. Kevin O'Connell has run fourth downs in both of his 2 seasons at about 37% of the time, the calculator would say. That was slightly above average in his first year, and it's slightly below average this year. Right, so he hasn't really changed, but the league has gotten more aggressive this season on fourth downs in general, which is a good thing. Like coaches should be more aggressive on fourth downs generally. The thing is, Kevin O'Connell is one of the least aggressive coaches. He's like bottom 5 in terms of how aggressive he is on fourth downs when the Vikings are leading, and he's much more aggressive. He goes for it over 50% of the time that he should, which is like it's like 12th or something, but it's above average when the Vikings are trailing. Right, and it's more than 50% of the time that he should, so it's significantly higher. So it really is kind of like when the offense has the lead, he's been very conservative, and when they're down, he's a lot more aggressive.
The theme of what I'm hearing thematically here is that generally speaking, he's very aggressive if the game is in balance, and then immediately becomes much more conservative when we have a lead, whatever the lead is.
Yeah,
whether it's different or not.
Yeah, ultimately, that's kind of the conclusion I came to from this piece, right? Which, as a philosophy, like at the end of the day, like you do want to rely on your defense and stuff like that. And the Vikings defense is playing pretty well, but I just prefer to be aggressive throughout. And I'd rather have a coach be aggressive when they're down, right, than completely turtle and just give up when they're down. So like he deserves credit from that end. And it's not like he's the worst in the league at going for it on fourth down in general. It's just he becomes a lot more conservative when you're going up. And I think that this kind of whole discussion that we're having here right now is separate and should be considered separate from his general play calling prowess and his general ability to design an offense. Like I think the role of a head coach is to make these critical decisions in games, is to know when to call timeouts, is to know when to call challenges, but it's the success of an organization is so much more than that, right?
Absolutely.
Than just that is like him making suboptimal decisions in these areas is not a good thing for the Vikings, but it's also not some sort of cause for him to be fired or something like that, right? Like
let's not forget that for many years, and there's probably a lot of young fans who would not even realize this, but for many years, Andy Reid had many of the same criticisms in Philadelphia. People used to hammer his end of game decision making, his use of timeouts, these things that
he still consistently has problems taking timeouts at the right time. Like,
but he's a Super Bowl champion now, so shut up.
He's gotten a lot more aggressive on fourth downs, because he has Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback, right? Duh. Why wouldn't you be more aggressive in that type of situations? But I think
I'm not
like
I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying it's one of those things that it maybe doesn't have as big an impact on the
No,
quality of the coach.
I'm adding to your point here is really what
Yeah,
I want to do is like, yeah, Andy Reid, honestly, like he hasn't fixed all of his game management issues that he has. If you really study it and like, okay, he could have done this and that more optimally. But it doesn't
right,
matter because he's so good as an offensive play caller and he did such a good job working with and developing Patrick Mahomes, and that's not to say he's the reason Patrick Mahomes is good, right? But like,
right,
that he's part of the reason Patrick Mahomes is good. Like he did such a good job with that he has 2 Super Bowl rings and it doesn't matter. Like,
right.
so at the end of the
Absolutely.
day, it's a very important part of coaching, and it's like the easiest stuff for us to get mad about because it's what we learned playing Madden growing up, right? Like everybody can pick up a video game controller and figure out how to game manage the clock at the end of the game. Not everybody can do what Kevin O'Connell is doing in terms of getting players open and kind of designing a high quality offense, particularly on the passing game, which I think he is. So
Yeah. Oh, we can definitely agree on that. And let's unpack this in a little more detail. So we've talked about end of game situations, but what led to that end of game situation? What put us in a position where we're having that conversation instead of, an entirely different one? And obviously that's how you play
yeah,
during the game. That's
yeah,
a
no, for real.
pretty big part of the process. Obviously one of the big uh, parts of this game on the offensive side of the ball, turnovers. We had a lot of ugly turnovers, which was a problem that has kind of lingered for us all year long. What did you see on the turnovers this week, Matt? Anything notable in terms of responsibility?
Yeah, so like first of all, turnovers are going to be the reason the Vikings win and lose games. I don't think that's like, I mean, we've been talking about it a lot on this podcast. Other people talk about it like, and it's not some world breaking revelation. Like people have been talking about this since the beginning of football time of like, you got to take care of the ball or you're not going to win the football game, right? Like
Yep.
it's interesting how illustrative it's been of the Viking season, where when they lose the turnover battle, they are 1-6, and when they win the turnover battle or are tied in the turnover battle, they're 5-0, right?
It's there's a reason they use the term give away, right? I think
But
there's something really poetic
yeah,
about that. It's literally I'm handing it to you.
yeah,
Here you go. You go ahead. I don't even want you to have to fight for it. I'm giving it
yeah.
away.
And they had another. I mean, punts are kind of turnovers, right? But like they had another true turnover situation on the fourth down where they hold on a second. The Vikings at the end of the day, like they had that one extra turnover, right? Where it was the fourth down, that's kind of a turnover. Obviously, the one fourth down they failed, but it was an interception as well. So that gets counted as turnover where the other fourth down failure doesn't, right? But whatever, that's kind of just nitpicky. 4 turnovers in this game. The Vikings are 31st in turnovers in the NFL. The Raiders are the only team with more. They're last in turnovers per drive. They have the most fumbles in the NFL, which is kind of the most frustrating part. But they didn't fumble the ball at all in this game. They just threw 4 interceptions, and I think primarily the responsibility of them is on Dobbs. I just don't think he has kind of the arm strength that he either thinks he has or that like. I'm starting to question whether or not it's functional for the NFL level, to be honest with you, because that first turnover, it was somewhat of a timing issue in the offense too, and maybe that's the real answer. That first turnover, Jalen Johnson made a good play on it, but it's a cover 2 hole shot. Like as soon as Jalen Johnson takes a step forward, which I think he tried to bait the hole shot, right? So credit to him for making that bait and like forcing Dobbs to take the bait, and Dobbs didn't make the throw. But as soon as he steps forward, he should be eliminated from that play. You should have the arm strength as an NFL quarterback to hit that hole shot. And Dobbs takes a little bit of an extra reset to get lined up, makes the throw, and the guy is able to come underneath and intercept it. Ball probably should have been a little bit more further, but it definitely needed to have more zip on it. The other thing is kind of a decision-making thing. The Jalen Johnson drop, right, which wasn't an interception, but he basically could have had a pick six against TJ Hawkinson on third down. Arm strength issue to me, partly. Josh Allen might be able to fire that throw in there. There's not a lot of quarterbacks who are able to fire that throw in there. I think it was just kind of a poor decision from him because he's got a corner who is who TJ Hawkinson is trying to threaten vertically, right? And TJ Hawkins is very fast for a tight end. He's not fast for a wide receiver, so he's not going to outrun a cornerback. And he's like the cornerback can sit on that route a little bit, and you don't want to be throwing a curl into a route that a corner is sitting on that's pick six city, right? If he reads that out and pumps and makes the corner jump, there was a corner route, an actual 7 route to KJ Osborne over the top that they could have hit. The second interception, totally on Jordan Addison. I saw somebody say like that it was slightly behind him. It hit him in the face mask, and Addison didn't slow down. Like ideally, maybe you want to lead your receiver a step on a route there, like a little bit in front of his frame. But if it's from the face mask to in front of him, that's an accurate throw to me. It was an accurate throw. Addison was just late getting his hands up. And I think that might be a chemistry issue or a timing issue with the receivers, where Dobbs has been late on a lot of passes, like half a tick late from when it should be coming out with anticipation from the break. So maybe Addison wasn't expecting it on time, but like
It definitely seemed like a timing
yeah,
thing.
I would rather have Addison expect the throw to be on time, which it was in this case, and maybe not in every other case, than expect it to be late, right? Because you want to be as late as possible with your hands, but not to the detriment of the ball hitting you in the face mask and it popping up and it's an interception, right? And that should have been a first down that put the Vikings in scoring range. The third interception was the fourth down play. It was just a well covered play by the Bears. I didn't love the design from the Vikings on that play. KJ Osborne wasn't able to get open. Ball pops up into the air. It's a pick. The fourth play was a little bit, to me, on Christian Darrisaw. He oversets on the play, but it was a quick game kind of play, and Josh Dobbs drifted into a hit from the defender. So Darrisaw is the one who allows the hit and allows the pressure because he overset to kind of protect against a throw to the outside. Which you still can't let the guy get inside of you and get a free run at the quarterback in case something goes wrong, right? But Dobbs tries to get the ball out. The problem is he drifts left into the defender from his drop back. So it's a combination of Darrisaw screwed up the block because he overset and got beat inside, and then Dobbs screwed up his drop and didn't fall away to allow himself to make the throw. He gets hit, it gets popped up in the air, it's a turnover. And then the other one's the TJ Hawkinson throw where Dobbs was behind, right? So the Addison throw, I don't think Dobbs was behind personally. I think that was a fine throw. The TJ Hawkinson throw was very clearly behind because Hawkinson had to catch it behind him. He had to, kind of turn behind him and jump to slow his momentum. And in slowing his momentum, it brought him not only back past the sticks because he cut the route exactly at the sticks, it brought him back behind the sticks, but also prevented him from breaking away from a cornerback who was covering, right? He beat the corner in the route, but the corner was allowed to catch up because of the throw. So those kind of turnover situations, primarily on Dobbs, Addison responsible for one, good coverage, I would say, responsible for the other, and then a shared responsibility between Dobbs and Darrisaw for one. But like the pick and the failed fourth down were on Dobbs to me. So it's just kind of a comeback down to earth moment for him.
Right. And it's unfortunate because, heading into the bye week, it sort of sets him up now for probably a benching. And it's going to be real hard to come by another opportunity in the NFL.
And it's really hard because, the situation Dobbs is in is what's leading to this, right? Like he just doesn't have the timing down in with the rhythm of the offense that I think he needs to have at this point. And maybe that's a him thing, and it's something that he wouldn't be able to get, but it's really hard to come into this offense 4 weeks into the season and say, oh, we need to get this down. And like, from the whiteboard perspective, I think that Dobbs honestly was he's going through reads and he's making the reads. There may be a couple plays where he's skipping reads or looking to run more quickly, which I think is fair. Like, I don't expect this guy to know our entire offense and have all the answers cleanly in 4 weeks, right? But in general, I think he's trying to go through and execute the play as it's designed and doing an okay job of understanding what the coverage looks are giving him and where he needs to go with the ball, right? I don't think there was a throw in this game except that near interception where you can say Dobbs made the wrong read and threw the ball to the wrong spot. Right. The problem is the timing's off, and that's something that takes a lot of time to develop, and they work on all offseason with the receivers and with the drop back deaths and with the play calls and that sort of stuff. So they're never going to have that time to be able to get that back, right, with him. And I don't know if that's going to be the case for Hall and the other guys either, right? Because Jaron Hall they haven't had snaps with the starting team. I mean, Jaron Hall, I guess, had 1 week of reps, right? But Kirk Cousins has taken the majority of the reps with the starting team. Now they've been in the system, so they kind of understand the drop back deaths and where they need to go and all that stuff a little bit better. So maybe that's your hope there. But it's not like it's an easy fix and something that's, I think, going to immediately be good when we bring somebody else in there. So that's my last thing on Dobbs, where it's like, it is kind of falling back down to earth, right? Because we are asking him to do more real offense things. I think it was fair if he understands how to execute the things to try to ask him to do that. But if we continue with him, I think we just need to ask him to play more playground moving forward than what we have so far.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And speaking of falling down back down to earth, Jordan Addison, came out of the gates looking like a rookie of the year. That's certainly still on the table. I think physically he's still the same guy. There's nothing too crazy happening here, but even stepped in for JJ as a pretty reliable option post injury there. Made some really spectacular plays and has been making them. Last couple of weeks, a little bit quiet, not making as much noise, not seeming as reliable.
Yeah.
He almost had that deep ball early in the game that probably would have changed the whole complexion of the game. I don't really blame him for dropping that. It was a really tough catch,
Yeah.
but what's going on with Jordan? Have you seen anything that you've noticed that he is different, or is it just a matter of he can't really handle the 1A role yet, or what's going on?
Yeah, I think and this is something that we've seen throughout the season. I don't think this is a new issue that's cropping up, but play strength has definitely been an issue for him. And it was, kind of on the scouting report, like obviously he's very slender frame, right? But we've seen a number of passes this year where he has had the ball in his hands. He's had both hands on the ball and he's used good catch technique to make those passes. So it's really a little bit difficult because you can't be like, oh, if we shore up this catch technique, it's going to get better. It's really, and there was a play on the sideline in this game where he had a catch and the defender ripped it out onto the ground, right? And there was another, the play that didn't get overturned was almost there. The deep shot is another ball that he had in his two hands and it got ripped out by the defender, right? That's why it was even a question of whether or not it was a catch. And that was a really difficult catch, right? That's not something I would expect a receiver to make. It would have been a spectacular catch if he did. But, and to be fair, Addison shouldn't be expected to be a 1A in this offense, right? Our 1A is hurt in Justin Jefferson, and he's filled in admirably as a 1B. But, it's just something that he needs to improve on as he grows as an NFL receiver, right? He's 21 years old. It's not like he can't ever get stronger in the NFL, but it's definitely something that he needs to do. And it's been part of the reason for this slump, in my opinion, right? Because he's just not completing the process of the catch. Like, he's doing a great job up to the point where he needs to hold on to the football after he catches it. And that's where the struggle is kind of coming in. So
feels correctable. Maybe not a huge issue, but definitely something to look at.
It's kind of a weight room issue to me, right? Like let's get this guy, let's bulk this guy up a little bit and get a little bit more.
Get huge. Come on, Jordan, get huge. All right. So, one would think, looking at the score, not knowing anything about this game, that this was purely a defensive struggle. You may not even realize there were as many turnovers as there were, though, because the score does not seem to look like one team had a bunch of turnovers and the other, had opportunities to capitalize. For some reason, the score was close. And I think a lot of that credit is due to Brian Flores and the defensive performance on that side of the ball. Let's talk about our defense a little bit. And I see you're smiling. I don't know if it's because my transition was so brilliant that you're full of joy or what, but let's talk about Brian Flores.
It's smiling because I love this defense. It's just it's so different from anything else we've seen really in the NFL. And actually a really good piece on ESPN came out. Kevin Seifert wrote it on the Brian Flores defense. And it kind of talks about, because if listeners remember back to the beginning, like when we talked about Flores, we talked about heavy blitz rates and man coverage behind it, right? And what we've seen is heavy blitz rates and zone coverage behind it, which was a curveball that I did not expect, frankly, going into the season. And it talks about kind of how he developed that defense as part of his last year in Pittsburgh, right? Like the influences from talking with actually Pat Narduzzi's staff and the University of Pittsburgh, right? Not the Steelers, even though he was coaching for the Steelers. They literally have the same facilities. That was kind of like the whole joke when Kenny Pickett got drafted, that like he doesn't even need to move where he's working out and stuff because they work out in the same like building. I assume they have different workout rooms or whatever, but it's literally the building is attached for Pitt and the Steelers. But so it's a really interesting and unique kind of system, and I think it worked to perfection against the Bears because they have a quarterback in Justin Fields who is not great at processing defenses at this point in his career from a passing perspective. And it allowed them to load the box against the quarterback run game that the Bears were employing. So the Bears got them a couple times on outside runs in the QB run game. But overall, like the Bears averaged like 4.2 yards per attempt in this game, which is pretty abysmal, especially when you have a quarterback who's as effective as Fields, right? The running backs were not successful at all running the
Yeah.
ball. And that's because the Vikings are very heavy in terms of loading the box. And then once it's not a run, they kind of back off into coverage. And the Bears weren't able to get really anything open all game downfield until that DJ Moore completion at the end of the game. Like literally, if you look at the Bears drop back passes, it's Justin Fields making multiple guys miss in the backfield, getting out on the edge, and then either throwing the ball away or completing it, for a short-ish gain. There wasn't a lot of stuff open immediately, and the stuff that was open immediately was like quick game, right? And then that doesn't even account for the fact that the Bears ran 80 freaking million screens in this game, right? And it was just a disaster garbage game plan from them. I'm sorry. Like part of the reason I was smiling is because like, hey, the Vikings defense played great in this game. Also, the Bears offense is a complete dumpster fire. Like it's embarrassing. Like I was watching this game yesterday and I felt bad for Bears fans. I was like getting mad at how bad the offensive architecture of this team is. There were in the first 4 true dropbacks, they let an unblocked in the first 5 true dropbacks. They let an unblocked defensive lineman. One time it was Danielle Hunter get a free run at Fields twice. One time it was Hunter, one time it was Bullard. It's like, how are you not blocking Jonathan Bullard on a play from the Vikings? Like, I don't care what you have to do. Like, you can't let a guy who's wearing number 90, who's like 300 pounds, run unblocked. Like, that's just unsound football. They let Danielle Hunter unblocked twice in this game. Or one time it was like a matchup with the running back where the running back didn't get there because he's going against Danielle Hunter. But it's just like, that's an embarrassing game plan and protection plan. The screens, without having a single play other than a screen, right? Like all game, I was waiting for the Bears. Okay, they're going to do like a double pass like the Chargers did, or they're going to pump a screen and they're going to go deep and the Vikings defense is going to bite on it and they're going to get a huge play. They didn't do that. Why didn't they do that? Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, definitely a combination of brilliant play calling on one side of the ball and not so brilliant play calling on the other. So it's all very, very interesting to hear. What I wanted to talk a little bit about is, I had mentioned earlier that it felt like the Bears were in our playbook a little bit on offense.
Mm-hmm.
Like they'd watched a lot of tape, they Matt Freesed it. It seemed like from the perspective of watching the game, maybe that some of that same kind of thing. Matt, can we cut this? Can we try this again?
Yeah. We'll try it again.
Disaster. I totally. Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it was like watching this week? Were we in the Bears playbook by chance?
Through the magic of editing, you'll hear a couple of Gregg's mishaps in terms of trying to intro
I'm a
this,
disaster right now. I don't know what's going on.
I just think that at the end of the day, I just don't think the Bears offense is very sound from like a structural perspective. So maybe we were in the Bears playbook, but like the Vikings didn't do anything in this game that they haven't really been kind of putting on tape all season. Like they've backed off in terms of the blitz percentage, but like, I don't know, a real person who watches the Vikings offense should know that you can't run 15 screens against the Vikings, which, by the way, the Bears ran exactly 15 screen calls. 2 they didn't actually throw.
No,
but
that is a lot.
Yeah, that's absurd. That's like, Justin Fields threw like 30-something passes. Like, literally half of his dropbacks were screens.
Matt, is there anywhere online that I could see all of those screenplays in one place?
Yeah, on my Twitter timeline. But
interesting. Maybe I should make my way over there.
But like the Vikings got 10 stops on those screens. That's a 33% success rate on screens. That's abysmal. And like one of the successes was like an 8-yard gain on 2nd and 10. So they brought up a 3rd down. Congratulations. Like it was just a wild game plan philosophy for me from the Bears. I don't understand what you would if you would watch this Vikings defense and see how they attack screens and think, you know what, we're gonna get them on screens all day today, and we're just gonna run this 15 times. Like that's either a vote of complete no confidence in Justin Fields' ability to process an offense in general, or it's just an offensive coordinator who has no idea what they're doing. So
Maybe it's both.
that's pretty harsh, right? That's slamming
Yeah.
the Bears a little bit. The Vikings, I think, they're so much fun on defense. They do such a good job in terms of being able to stop the run and then doing confusing coverages or coverages that opponents aren't expecting on the back end. And it works really well. And I think they stuck to receivers really, really well in this game. And honestly, even on the last drive, right, where Flores is coming under fire, 4 of the 5 dropbacks, the Vikings did a great job with coverage, and they just couldn't corral Justin Fields, which I don't think was a non-blitzing issue. Like, they weren't really able to corral Justin Fields when they blitzed either. They got 3 sacks in this game officially. One of the sacks, I think Justin Fields just took off to run, and Danielle Hunter punched the ball out behind the line of scrimmage, right? That technically counted as a sack fumble. It's not really a sack. Like, I'm gonna count it all day for Danielle Hunter's season sack total, right? But it's not really a sack. There were a couple other plays where they did blitz, and they had a pretty good contain plan in general in this game. And even on that last drive, they got a 16-yard play. Like, they had a good contain plan. Justin Fields just kind of threw back across his body, and it was to a guy who was open because he extended the play for so long. So to me, like, I'm not too critical of that end of game decision making. The last play call, the Bears beat them, right? That 33 DJ Moore play, like, they get credit for that. But the Vikings were beating the Bears offense like a drum all game. So at the end of the day, like, I'm not upset at Flores really for anything.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. That's why I mentioned earlier I would just carve them out of that discussion entirely. I mean, I just
Yeah.
don't put a lot on the defense this week in terms of why we lost. That said, it's really hard to take away a lot of positives from a
Sure.
game like this and from a loss like this. But and this is becoming a theme, I think, increasingly for this team this year. There's some people that really stood out on defense, and
Mm-hmm.
let's talk a little bit about individual performances before we kind of turn our backs on this game forever. Who did you notice this week that really stood out?
Yeah, so the first person that jumps off the tape is Ivan Pace.
Of
And
course it is.
like, his sack was so cool because the Vikings, that first drive for the Bears, it was on the first drive, I think, for the Bears. And Fields escaped like 4 different Vikings defenders on scrambles, right? And it's like, come on, man, like, can we eventually corral this guy? And Ivan Pace just has an absolutely absurd rush. He just leaps around. It's like a jump cut around the running back. The running back doesn't even get a hand on him, and he's able to make a diving wrap around Justin Fields' waist and bring him down. Like, it was just a crazy, absurd tackle. It's a lot of fun. In run defense, I think he's great coming forward too. There was one where he just completely knocked the Bears center on his knees, Lucas Patrick, in run defense, and helped make a play, right? On that. In general, I think he does a pretty good job reading and reacting and hitting the gaps that he needs to on run defense. So just shout out those couple plays from him. Danielle Hunter had his regular ridiculous day on offense, on defense rather, right? Like, I don't know, he got the second half, right? He punches the ball out, forces a fumble. That's a great defensive play from him. But in run defensive in particular, I think he was pretty impressive. He collapsed tight ends multiple times, and one of those tight ends on the Bears in terms of run blocking is Mercedes Lewis, who's basically an eligible tackle out there. He let's see, there was one play where he came like all the way across the field on the backside. Oh, it was the field scramble early on where he's like out of the play and he's completely on the backside. Fields does a rollout to the other side and he comes back and gets in on the tackle, right? It's just like the combination of effort and ability from him is crazy. He shut down 2 screens on that first drive where one, it was like basically he read it so well, he was basically like hugging Cole Kmet the whole time, even as he caught the pass, because, it was kind of one of those, we'll call it like an Olay block, right, where he goes up to block him and then dips around him, but Hunter reads it and basically is right on top of him. So just a really truly another impressive game for Danielle Hunter. I mean, we talk about him every single week, it feels like, but it's like warranted that we talk about him every single week. It's just a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
And then on the run defense side, Harrison Phillips had another monster day in run defense. Sheldon Day, I want to shout out as somebody who, this was his first game of the season. He was a practice squad player most of the season. Obviously a veteran, right? He's been in the league for a little while, but he was somebody from the preseason who I thought should have made the roster with how he was playing. And against the Bears, I thought he showed the exact same things he was doing in the preseason. It was kind of like T.Y. McGill. His preseason this year was like T.Y. McGill last year, if people remember that, where he just kind of dominated and had like 3 sacks. And it was crazy. And then the Vikings cut him, and I'm like, guys, what are you doing? Here, they were at least able to keep Day on the practice squad, and he came in with Dean Lowry out, and I thought was a really strong presence on the interior. There were like 5 plays where I thought he kind of made the play for the Vikings defense. So that was really nice to see. And then finally, I think the least heralded starting member of the Vikings defense coming into the season, right? The guy who, when they extended him, prior to the season, everybody was like, really? That much money for Josh Metellus? And it was a sign, like, you heard the rumors. You heard the rumors through training camp that, yeah, Metellus is absolutely the third safety above Lewis Cine, right? Because everybody, going into training camp was like, oh man, Lewis Cine. And I was too. Like, I thought this defense would be good for him. He hasn't come along, but Josh Metellus is the guy who really caught on in this defense, right? And we knew Flores ran a ton of 3 safety stuff, particularly in New England, right? But I don't think we realized the extent to which Flores would run 3 safety stuff, where on some plays we've had 1 cornerback in Byron Murphy and 3 safeties on the field for 4 defensive backs, right? Like it's like we rarely run with 3 corners on the field, and Byron Murphy and Josh Metellus as the third safety is like always on the field, right? And he's just been such a pivotal chess piece for the Vikings, and it was kind of talked about in the Seifert piece how he's used in multiple different facets, from a blitzing perspective, from a coverage perspective, even like he's done man coverage on tight ends and stuff like this. In this game, he forced the 2 Justin Fields fumbles. He was in on the one, and I'm sorry, he did not force the two Justin Fields fumbles. He forced 2 fumbles in this game. He was the one who forced the fumble by the running back that the Bears recovered on a drive, which Justin Fields later fumbled. But he was wrapped around Justin Fields when Danielle Hunter punched the ball out, right? So if that was a sack, and if they just brought him down to the ground, it would have been a half sack from Metellus. I think... Was he the one who got he was the one who got the other half sack with Danielle Hunter early in the game, where he was the one who truly got the sack, and Hunter came in later, and it was kind of a gift half sack for Hunter. But hey, again, we'll take those for Danielle Hunter, right? We want him to get all the sacks he can possibly get.
Metellus was a monster this week. He was a monster.
So yeah, he's just everywhere. Screen defense, he's blowing stuff up. And he's good in coverage on like man coverage on tight ends. He's not going to be a guy who is a true center field safety like an Ed Reed. He's not going to be a guy who's, as a safety, able to cover able to cover receivers like Tyrann Mathieu or whatever you want to have. Like, bring a safety down and have him able to cover corners. But he is a guy who's going to eliminate slower tight ends, right? He's not going to be a true like a Travis Kelce eraser, but he's going to be a Cole Kmet eraser, right? Like, and I just really love the way he's played. He's asked to be in the box, but he's also asked to go deep in zone coverage. It's like he's just been an incredible player and a revelation for the Vikings this year, when it's like, you extend him before the season and you're really questioning that decision, and then all of a sudden it looks like an awesome decision. So it's great.
Absolutely. You got to have players like that if you're going to have success. So those are some of the positives, but the bottom line is the Vikings lost the game. We've lost now 2 very crucial games in a row, games that I think many fans were expecting to win. We're standing at 3. That's our magic number. We need 3 wins over the next 6 weeks to get into the playoffs. Only 5 games in those 6 weeks because we have a bye week.
It may be more than that at this point with the way the Rams and the Packers and them are.
I've just had that number in my head. It may have changed. That's true. I haven't checked it. But bottom line is we need to win the majority of our next 5 games.
Yep.
We have the bye week here, and then we kick things off against a feistier than expected Raiders team.
Well, feistier because they fired their head coach. So usually that magic wears off after a couple weeks, frankly.
Well, hopefully it'll wear off by the time we play them. And then we have a follow-up with the now limping Bengals, who are probably they're definitely a lot easier to play than they would have been. And then we have our divisional wrap-up. Yeah. Lions, Packers, then Lions again. Should be some really interesting football, to say the least. Matt, are we going to make the playoffs?
I mean, At this rate, I would say no. To be completely honest with you, I
Wow,
mean,
I didn't expect that.
it's hard. Like with the way, I mean, I don't know. The NFC kind of sucks in general, so that'll give us back. Like I don't think the Vikings, with the way that they've played the last couple weeks, are going to be a deserving playoff team. But the problem is they lost their quarterback. Right? We wrote the season off for dead when Kirk Cousins went down with the Achilles injury, and then we win 2 games with Josh Dobbs, and now we're kind of flipping back to writing off the season a little bit, right? So they have a legit shot. I don't think they're going to make noise in the playoffs if they do make it. So like if you made me guess right now, I'd say no. I'd say we beat the Bengals because our backup quarterback is better than Jake Browning, former Viking.
We know that for a fact.
And we probably beat the Raiders, but we need to take one game against the Lions and the Packers, and we might be able to do that, but I'm not fully convinced. So
I'm inclined to agree with you, Matt. And I'm always the pessimist on this show, I feel, and I hate to be keep playing that role, but it definitely feels like a much bigger mountain than I think any of us expected. But we have a bye week to rest. That does not mean Kindred Skulls will be resting. We'll be back next week for our bye week awards, which is becoming kind of an annual thing, I think, at this point. It's like 3 years in a row,
did
right?
it. We did it last year too. We got one in, so I was happy
yeah.
that.
So excited about that. It may be the full crew. It just depends on how scheduling works out and so on. But really looking forward to that. Matt, do you have any last words here?
Yeah, so we just kind of doomed a little bit, but Justin Jefferson is almost certainly coming back next week against the Raiders. They activated his practice window. I think that's just because they activated him off of his practice window. I think that's just because it was literally the last day he could be activated off of his practice window. They kind of had to do it or he wasn't going to be able to play for the rest of the season. So hopefully with the bye done, he's back from his hamstring. That should give a huge boost to the offense, right? Having like the best wide receiver in the NFL is probably a good thing.
Probably make an impact.
Many people would suggest that, I think. So that's good. I'm really excited and pumped for the bye week awards show next week. I think there's a lot of fun Vikings to talk about. I might have spoiled some of my picks in our recent conversation, just talking about how players are playing well, but we'll see. We'll see what we come up with for that. But
keep it under wrap. Matt, come on,
we're gonna wrap it up.
All right. Yes, I'm looking forward to it as well. All right. Well, you can find Matt on Twitter at Fries Football. You can find our other co-host Nick Olson, who's not here at the moment, on Twitter at Nick Olson NFL. You can find me on Instagram. I've actually changed my handle. You can find me under the Gregg Blake. I'm on there. And you can find us as a show at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. And by searching YouTube, you can find our videos. Just search for Kindred Skulls. Matt, been a pleasure hanging with you this afternoon. A little bit of a muted tone, post-loss, but always good to see you, man.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. It was a lot of fun, Greg. Skull Vikings.
Digital hugs.
Goal, baby. Another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind. And we'll score the old Vikings along. We'll score.